Hello, this is Dr. Jehonathan Bentovish, and I'm recording this very important and quite urgent talk in which I'm calling astronomers and cosmologists to carry out a time-sensitive measurement of a critical prediction of what's considered increasingly to be the new scientific paradigm for the 21st century for theoretical physics. God's Physics, there's been obviously a book and over 100 peer-reviewed scientific articles published. God's Physics New Scientific Paradigm, which was previously called the computational flight field theory. And God's Physics is, as I said, I'm being invited to open international physics and astronomy and related conferences, international conferences about this new scientific paradigm of God's physics for the new 21st century theoretical physics. And so I would just briefly summarize the importance of this critical prediction or measurement. We stand, in a sense, at a historic point that is equivalent essentially to Einstein's general theory of relativity, which was validated by an equivalent critical prediction of that Eddington tested. As we all know, when we get to those points which Thomas Kuhn, the famous philosopher of science, in his analysis of the structure of scientific revolutions, which was accepted widely by the scientific community, he analyzed the manner in which scientific paradigms evolve and eventually change. And he essentially pointed out that science evolves through an alternation between what he called standard paradigm, and I would take the historic example of Newtonian classical mechanics. That was a standard paradigm for a while, and then the standard paradigm reaches a dead end. And that dead end essentially is characterized by a situation in which the standard paradigm, the old standard paradigm, exhibits signs of distress, so to speak. Those signs of distress include theoretical inconsistencies within the foundations of this old standard paradigm. In the case of Newtonian mechanics, there was theoretical inconsistency between Newtonian mechanics, classical mechanics, and Maxwellian electromagnetic theory. And so that's one of the distress signs signifying the need for what Thomas Kuhn calls a paradigmatic shift, in which science would actually make a leap from the old standard paradigm, in this case, Newtonian mechanics, to the new paradigm, which was Einstein's general relativity theory. And the second sign of distress essentially is the fact that the old paradigm, in this case, Newtonian mechanics, cannot explain certain key phenomena, empirical phenomena. In the case of Newtonian mechanics, this was obviously the ether concept, which was key for Newtonian mechanics, but yet could not be detected. And so many experiments back then were done, including the famous Michelson-Morley experiment, and none of them was able to validate this key phenomena, empirical phenomena, which was essential for Newtonian mechanics. So in other words, the ether concept, which was assumed to perfuse the whole universe, a fine and very elusive, completely hypothetical element, could not be verified. So these two distressing symptoms or signs of the old paradigm, the old standard paradigm, Thomas Kuhn tells us, those signify or are preceding a paradigmatic shift. In other words, when the standard paradigm reaches such a dead end, a situation of a paradigmatic crisis, signified by theoretical inconsistencies within its foundation and an empirical phenomena a key empirical phenomena that cannot be validated, cannot be explained, This signifies the need to find and validate a new paradigm. And there is, when a new paradigm is suggested, in the case of Einstein's general relativity theory, he suggested a theory that could resolve the apparent theoretical inconsistencies between Newtonian mechanics and Maxwellian electromagnetic theory. And this new general relativity theory was also able to offer an alternative explanation, in a sense discard the ether concept as superfluous, as non-existent. And when these conditions are met, the key condition, the key turning point, the determining factor that would convince unequivocally the scientific community, or has convinced in the past, and I'm going to talk about God's physics and how we stand at an equivalent historic point where the scientific community is looking for this determining factor to embrace the new God's physics scientific paradigm for the 21st century. So I'm just concluding and saying that in the case of Einstein's general relativity theory, since or given that Einstein's general relativity theory was able to resolve the apparent inconsistencies between Maxwellian classical mechanics, Newtonian classical mechanics, and Maxwellian electromagnetic theory, and was also able to discard the ether concept and offer an alternative explanation for that phenomenon, then the determining factor is actually finding a critical prediction, a unique critical prediction. In the case of Einstein's general relativity theory, this critical prediction had to do with Einstein's identification and prediction of the double-valued perihelion pathway curvature of Mercury around the sun, due to the sun's gravitational force curving space-time around it, and in a sense causing the double-valued pathway of Mercury around the sun, 1.6 arc as opposed to 0.8 arc, as predicted by the old Newtonian mechanics paradigm. And we stand at an exciting historic turning point, equivalent point, because I'm just going to outline this. Again, there's over 100 articles being written. I'm just doing this brief outline in order to call for the next quote-unquote Eddington to carry out this critical measurement, which is time sensitive, and I'll talk about this in a second, but that would be a validation that is equivalent to Eddington's verification of Einstein's predicted unique double-valued curvature of Mercury around the sun. And indeed, when Eddington boldly was able to carry out that expedition on 1919 solar eclipse, and he was able to show and measure and validate Einstein's double-valued 1.6 arc prediction, pretty much overnight, Einstein's general theory of relativity was accepted as a new 20th century physics paradigm. And we stand at an equivalent point, because God's physics comes and has been accepted, or is being more and more widely accepted as the new paradigm for 21st century theoretical physics. This is a new paradigm that is giving an answer and providing the necessary qualifying, satisfying these preliminary conditions, because we see, and I've written about this extensively, 100 articles and opening international physics conferences, just as the last, recent 6th International Astronomy and Astrophysics Conference, for which I was invited to deliver the keynote opening talk about God's physics' new scientific paradigm. But in any event, so we stand at an equivalent point. Why, you may ask? Because the old paradigm, which I call the material causal paradigm, underlying both relativity theory, general relativity theory, and quantum mechanics, has reached a point of a paradigmatic crisis. And that paradigmatic crisis is signified by the fact that there is a theoretical inconsistency, which I'm not going to get into right now, but there is a key basic theoretical inconsistency between general relativity theory and quantum mechanics, having to do with the constancy of the speed of light as opposed to the quantum entanglement phenomenon. well-known, well-described. So there's a theoretical inconsistency between general relativity theory and quantum mechanics. That's number one. And number two, there's a key empirical phenomena having to do with the accelerated rate of the universe's expansion. And in fact, the increase in the rate of the universe's expansion, which when we compare cosmological measurements around the Big Bang event, the background radiation, when we measure the rate of the universe's expansion through the background radiation, which is in the early cosmological measurements of the universe expansion, and we contrast this or we compare this to the astronomical value currently measured of the universe's expansion, the astronomical value of current measurements is higher than the cosmological value at the early stages of the universe. And this astronomical cosmological gap is unexplained. It's a major problem for science. The way that the old paradigm, the old material causal paradigm of general relativity theory and quantum mechanics tries to account for the accelerated rate of the universe's expansion, it does so by, again, purely hypothetical dark matter, dark energy concepts, which yet fail to be detected even after 20 years of intensive scientific experimentations, which could not detect this elusive dark matter, dark energy concepts. And as we know, by the way, Scientific American and other prestigious journals came out with various articles questioning now the validity of dark matter, dark energy. Scientific American came out with an article, "The Last Stand of Dark Matter, Dark Energy," and so we stand at the historic point because this paradigmatic crisis inevitably leads to the discovery of a new paradigm. The new paradigm in this case is God's physics, or the computational unified field theory. It's been previously called. So God's physics was shown to be capable of resolving this theoretical inconsistency between general relativity theory and quantum mechanics, and furthermore was able to discard dark matter and dark energy as superfluous, much the same way that Einstein discarded the ether concept as superfluous, as non-existent. And so the God's physics paradigm essentially has satisfied all the conditions that are necessary, and obviously it replicated all the previous findings, phenomena, and laws of both relativity theory and quantum mechanics. At the center of God's physics new paradigm is the discovery of the singular higher ordered universal computational / consciousness principle. This UCP is hypothesized to simultaneously compute all the exhaustive spatial pixels of the universe, creating an incredible rapid rate of universal frames, much the same way that we see in a cinema film projection. We have a very rapid progression, relatively not as rapid, but rapid progression, 12 or 24 frames per second. And each frame contains the whole screen, the whole universe of the film. Much as this was used as a cinematic film metaphor in this theory, and essentially it says that this UCP creates this extremely rapid c squared divided by Planck's constant gives us 1.36 in the power of minus 50, so many trillions of times per second, that this UCP creates a series of universal frames, the whole universe, in a three-dimensional frame, which is created simultaneously, and between one frame and another, the whole universe dissolves back into this UCP. And so the God's physics new paradigm essentially was able to resolve these inconsistencies by the discovery of this singular higher ordered UCP, and replicate all the old findings and phenomena of relativity theory and quantum mechanics. At the heart of this God's physics new paradigm is the universal computational formula. And this universal computational formula essentially describes this UCP computing the whole universe at this incredible rate of c squared divided by Planck's constant, but it does much more than that. It unifies for the first time in physics between the four basic physical features of space-time, energy, and mass, Einstein was able to unify between space-time, which became a four-dimensional continuum, and energy mass, the famous energy mass equivalence, E equals mc squared, and the curvature of space-time by massive objects. But still, Einstein was not able to unify between the four basic physical features, which actually God's physics new paradigm and this universal conditional formula is able to do. So it unifies for the first time between the four basic physical features of space-time, energy, and mass, unifies between the four basic physical forces, and does unifies between relativity theory and quantum mechanics. They become special cases within this broader generalization. And so right now, I'm calling for this next bold, quote-unquote, Eddington. I'm calling for astronomers, bold astronomers, leading physics astronomy universities to collaborate with me. My personal email is drbentwich, drbentwich, @gmail.com. It's been published in all the articles. So I'm calling all bold astronomers, cosmologists, leading physics and astronomy universities to collaborate with me and carry out what would be equivalent to Eddington's verification of Einstein's general relativity theory. In this case, I'm going to explain this briefly, but it's been published, and any leading university or astronomer, cosmologist that would communicate with me, I would give more details. Essentially, this critical prediction, which is equivalent to, again, Eddington's verification of the double-valued Mercury's perihelion pathway around the sun. In the case of God's physics, there is a unique critical prediction. I would mention that there is two critical predictions of God's physics that have already been validated, having to do with the proton radius puzzle findings, and having to do with this gap between the cosmological astronomical gap in the universe's expansion rate, which I mentioned. I'll briefly just outline this and then point out what is this call for astronomers to collaborate with me. So God's physics new paradigm has a unique critical prediction which has already been validated indirectly, and now I'm calling for a direct validation. The indirect validation was associated, again, one with the proton radius puzzle, which I'm not going to get into, but it was published. Second one, which is more relevant to the call for the for astronomers and cosmologists right now, during the upcoming Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, 2 days time interval of the 16th and 17th of September 2023. But before I get into that, I'm just going to explain. Since the God's physics new paradigm essentially discovered and hypothesized this singular higher order universal consciousness principle, computational constant principle, UCP. And as we said, and has been extensively published, this UCP simultaneously computes those frames, universal frames, and creates this extremely rapid series of universal frames. And so the way that the new God's physics paradigm explains the accelerator of the universe's expansion is essentially it discards dark matter, dark energy. It cannot be found. There's other theoretical considerations, including the duality principle within God's physics, which theoretically and logically, empirically, negate the very possibility of the existence of dark matter, dark energy as the cause for the universe's expansion. But in any event, the idea is that God's physics offers an alternate explanation for the universe's expansion rate or increase in the universe's expansion rate. And that explanation is essentially that the UCP enlarges the frames, the universe's universal frames, from each frame to the subsequent frame. There's an increase in the number of pixels. That increase in the number of exhaustive spatial pixels has a certain rate, and that rate is kept constant during the year. But when there occurs what I call a collective human consciousness focus, when there is a large group of individual human beings, such as during the Jewish Rosh Hashanah, in which 2 days time interval, in this year it's going to occur on the 16th and 17th of September, in which millions of Jews, individual human beings, focus on this UCP. In religious terms, we would call it God. But in scientific terms, this universal consciousness principle, millions of individuals, human beings, Jews in this case, are focusing on this UCP during the 2 days Jewish Rosh Hashanah. And the prediction of God's physics new paradigm is that due to this collective human consciousness focus, such as during the Jewish Rosh Hashanah, you have there ensues an increase in the rate of the universe's expansion. In other words, according to God's physics new scientific paradigm, every year during the Jewish Rosh Hashanah, there would be an increase in the rate of the universe's expansion, which would translate to an increase over a period of time, over the universe's history. There would be an increase in the universe's expansion rate. And so the gap, in other words, the gap between the cosmological early universe's rate of expansion, which is lower significantly than the current astronomical rate of the universe's expansion, can be explained and has been predicted by God's physics new scientific paradigm due to this collective human consciousness focus. That's an indirect verification, validation of God's physics new scientific paradigm unique critical prediction. And it's important to mention, as I've written and published, has been published and lectured about, the old material causal paradigm of general relativity theory cannot account for this increase. That's why this gap, this astronomical cosmological gap in the universe's expansion rate cannot be accounted for, is a big problem, is a big unexplained phenomena at the center of general relativity theory. And that's one of the signs of this paradigmatic crisis, which inevitably leads to the discovery and eventually empirical validation of the new scientific paradigm. Specifically, I'm calling now for cosmologists, astronomers, and leading universities to collaborate with me. Again, my personal email is drbentwich, drbentwich @gmail.com, to collaborate with me and carry out this extremely important deciding experiment, because I'm calling astronomers and cosmologists to measure the rate of the universe's expansion before September 16th and 17th, 2023, and as opposed to during September 16th, 17th, and after that, and subsequently. And the claim is, or the prediction is, that if in fact we would find cosmologists, astronomers collaborating with me, key and leading universities collaborating with me, would find and validate that the rate of the universe's expansion has increased significantly during the 16th, 17th of September 2023, relative to the rate of the universe's expansion before 16th and 17th, in other words, 15th and before of September 2023. And we would find that new rate, there's an increase in the rate of the universe's expansion, and that new rate carries out during the next Jewish year. And this would unequivocally support the new God's physics paradigm as the new scientific satisfactory paradigm for 21st century theoretical physics. So it's hard to overestimate the importance and significance of this critical experiment and validation of critical unique prediction of God's physics new scientific paradigm. So again, I'm calling cosmologists, astronomers, leading physics and astronomy universities all over the world to communicate with me directly during my through my email or otherwise, drbentwich, drbentwich @gmail.com, and carry out this extremely important experiment that would decide and I believe validate the unique critical prediction of God's physics that the universe's rate of expansion will increase from the 16th, 17th of September onwards relative to the rate of the universe's expansion before. Obviously, it's very important. The sooner the better. I'm already in contact with some universities, but since it's such an important experiment and deciding factor that could, and I believe would, embrace God's physics as a new scientific paradigm for 21st century theoretical physics, it's very important that universities and astronomers, cosmologists contact and communicate with me as soon as possible, because these measurements have to occur at least 1 month before the 16th, 17th of September 2023. And it's an exciting point. It's an exciting turning point, which is equivalent, I believe, to the point of Eddington's verification and acceptance, ensuing acceptance of general relativity theory as the new paradigm for 20th century physics. The new paradigm, God's physics, new scientific paradigm, has already shown remarkable and very promising accomplishments and advancements of science and physics by unifying the four basic physical features of space-time, energy, and mass, by unifying general relativity theory and quantum mechanics and the four basic forces of nature. And so I'm looking forward to those bold astronomers, those new Eddingtons that would carry out this extremely important scientific experiment. Thank you very much.